you thought Genesis 1 was bad, Genesis 2 is like the Bible's authors asked for a redo and still managed to screw everything up.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Proselytize or Apostatize Raw. Yes, you got it. We are going to critique the friendly atheists again. I'm joined here with my co-host, David Paulman, and I'll let him introduce our guest.
Yep, good to be back with another episode, Russell. And yep, we've got Kyle Vollmer. I hope I said it right this time. Welcome on, Kyle.
What's up? And you still pronounced it wrong, so, three times the charm. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, what's up? Good to be here.
Glad to have you on. All right, so since you already started the video, Russell, let's just dive right into it.
We're responding to a fan, so they wanted us to do more of these videos, and that's why, the first of the year I decided, hey, this is the first Raw. Let's respond to the fan that asked for us to do this. So, that's kind of the point. And as you can see, I just want to note from the outset, the very opening of that video, you heard the friendly atheist. Do you all know his name? How to pronounce his name?
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, there we go.
I can't really pronounce his name. Yeah.
I love me some pronunciation. I like to pronounce things correctly, David.
So what are you saying? You're saying I don't?
Yeah.
Maybe I am.
But yeah, we're going to be responding to this for a fan. So they wanted us to do more. So throughout the year, I'm hoping to put some more of these ones on that we're responding to his exegesis or eisegesis, whatever you want to call it, because he's all over the place here. And yeah, so we're going to respond throughout, but we are going to give you guys more variety. Like I said, next week we got coming up, we got an interview with J. Warner Wallace, which is going to be fun. So yeah, stay tuned. We're going to dive into this and give it a quick critique. It's about 13 minutes long, but we're probably going to do this for about an hour because we talk a lot. So especially David Paulman, who's a presuppositionalist.
I'm full of hot air. Hey, my dad's a my dad's a pastor, all right? So long-windedness runs in the family.
All right.
Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. He rested, and all-powerful God poofed some things into existence and then thought, I need a nap. The rest of us need a vacation after a lot of work. God's been on a vacation for a literal eternity. Basically answers an email and thinks, I'm exhausted, back to sleep. What does God even do when he rests? It's not like he was all that busy a week earlier.
All right. So, David, I see you smiling over there. What do you got for us?
Man, I'm just like wondering because he claims to have been a Christian at one point, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And I mean, I guess he just didn't have, like the same sort of upbringing that I did, because I know that like when I was getting taught these Bible stories out, as a child, in all my Sunday school classes, or just my parents would like, as soon as they got to that point, like I didn't even have to ask like, Mom, why did God rest? They would just would jump right to the now, that can be misunderstood, but we're not saying that God needed to rest. That just means that he stopped. It means he took a break. It means there was a period here where he wasn't doing something. It's not saying that he took a nap, and I mean that's obvious in the Hebrew word used here. So I guess the lesson from this is just atheists and young earth creationists as well, before you try to interpret or criticize the Bible, make sure you know how, do word studies, figure out what these words mean, because it would just be less embarrassing for you.
Okay, Kyle, what do you got, man?
Yeah, so I'm in a similar boat to David. Now, I think, if I recall correctly, I believe Hammett, I don't think he has ever been a Christian. I think he was part of a different religion, which is an Eastern religion called the Jain or the Janus or something like that. But on the other hand, he spends the majority of his time online critiquing Christianity. And if you spend the majority of your time critiquing a given religion or ideological point of view, you should spend your time like devoted to understanding that point of view. I think that's very important. And I think that, I mean, I'm exactly with David. Like, that was one of the first things that I learned, that I experienced, is that the kind of rest that God is doing, it's just a cessation, right? He's just no longer creating. He is ceasing to create new things. And so that's just like, I don't know, it's not even like young earth creationist literalist. It's just this oddly queer hyper literalism about just taking, like, I feel like he would come along like the when Jesus says I am a door, and he's like, oh, Jesus is made of wood. Like, I don't know, it just seems very strange to me. But he has, there are some funny one liners that he has right there that I thought were pretty funny. So kudos at least on the humor part of things, but he definitely needs to be, I mean, more aware of the scholarship, because I'm not even all that well aware of Genesis scholarship, and I just know that means cessation, like not resting, like not taking a nap. And so I think that that's just a really, really easy thing that he should just be aware of if he's actually interacting with what the side he's critiquing has to offer.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree with both of you guys here. I also, just a fair word of warning: if you're going to critique an ancient manuscript, you kind of need to know what it's actually saying, and you got to kind of read it in the genre that it's meant to be read. So I think there's a big problem here when he's like differentiating between chapters 1 and 2. He's coming to the point where he's like, you know, God needs a vacation after a week of work. I mean, that's nonsense. I mean, that I don't think the authors were that stupid to have a contradiction like right in their face between chapters 1 and 2, even though they're not really separated between chapters that way. So it's not like there's a pause and then we're going to a new subject here. There is a transition, but that starts well after probably verses 4 is when the transition to the other narrative begins. So yeah, I would definitely critique that and say, know what you're talking about before you get into trying to debunk or to even criticize.
Yeah, and if I could just make one more comment in here, atheists, when you guys like go to critique the Bible, and you want to, don't take the perspective that it's stupid. All right, you can argue that it's wrong if you want. Feel free to do that, but the Bible is an ancient document, and in ancient times, it wasn't like today where everyone was literate, so you could just have idiots out there writing things. People who were writing things had to be educated because the literacy rate was incredibly low then. So anyone who was able to write was an extremely educated person. So the Bible wasn't written by idiots, all right? That doesn't mean that everything it's saying is true. It can be wrong and stuff, but what it's saying is not stupid. And so when you're trying to treat it like it is, it just shows, I think, an ignorance of the culture and the times when the Bible was written.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that real quick, I think if you really dig into the text of Genesis, like especially really Genesis 1 especially, but also the entire book of Genesis, there are just some literarily masterful parts throughout the course of that book. I mean, there's extreme symbolism in the context of the entirety of Genesis 1 with like numerology and some other stuff, which, I mean, where it's very, very artful and clearly well thought out. And I definitely agreeing with David that like you'd had to be educated to be literate, but also, I mean, in a lot of ways, Genesis is just a work of art, like a work of ancient art in some ways. And so I think that if you're not coming to the text with ancient ideas in mind, you can really miss that. And it can seem stupid if you just take it to be that way or you want it to be that way.
All right, let's further on, gentlemen.
It's not like there were so many prayers for him to answer when there were no people in the universe. He has no friends to hang out with. And given all the chaos in the world right now caused by his believers, maybe he could do us all a favor and take another few days off, at least until the next election. Think about that first.
All right, so here's a crux right here, gentlemen, is this idea that the religious are the people that are the bad guys and they're the one at fault. Anybody got anything on that?
Yeah, because atheists, they never hurt anyone, or Joseph Stalin, that didn't exist or anything. It's all violence is due to religious people, obviously.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think that this is the way that things are, right? I think it's really easy when you disagree with someone, to be like hyper focusing on the kind of negative things that they are doing or have done, and especially with I think a lot of the way that a lot of modern news media is transported. Like I think we have a bigger picture of everything that's going wrong in the world when I think by and large things are pretty much okay, in a lot of ways. But it feels like it's worse because we're just being flooded with a lot of news information about all the negative things that are going on. And so I think that, especially for people like him, who, if you read his blog and stuff, a lot of the research that he does is around sort of the social aspects of religion, positively and negatively, atheism positively and negatively. And so I'm sure that he's pretty well acquainted with a lot of the news relative to the kind of negative things that religious people are doing. But I think that it's really that he's far too easily discounting like the positive things that religious people do, right? And I think that religion is even just not even talking about Christianity specifically, but just religion simpliciter, has a lot of positive impacts psychologically with regards to things. In America, it's not as much the case that it used to be, but it still is. And just throughout the large part of the world, I mean, I think it's largely a positive thing. So I think he's placing an unnecessary overemphasis here on negative aspects of
Yeah, and
religion.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I think there was a study done uh, that was a cumulative study about all the religions that took place in the world, and the ones that were because of religion was like lower than ones that were for like political power or unbelief, and secular wars were actually there was more deaths in secular wars than there ever were in religious wars either. So there's a big study there. I mean, I can't think of it right now. I wish I could. But moving on from that aspect, I did want to touch on how God has no friends type of thing. I mean, this is again a stab at ignorance towards the Christian faith. I mean, we believe in a triune God, so we believe that He was in fellowship, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit the entire time. David, you got anything that you want to say on that before we move on?
Yeah, and I mean, I know there's some debate over whether we should be using the Genesis text where God is, referring to Himself with plurals, right? Like, should we really be using that as an argument for the Trinity? Some people say yes, some people say no, but certainly you have something in the text that would at least suggest that God is not completely alone in this, or that He's not lonely, right? And so it seems like that, we don't get any indication that God is lonely in the text, or that He has no friends, as he put
Yeah,
it.
Kyle, do you got anything to add on that?
Nope, you
All
guys
right.
covered it perfect.
First line, too, how God completed the heavens and the earth. They're just done now. When the earth was actually created, we didn't even have a moon. And new stars form all the time, and some explode. Our sun won't be around forever. Leave it to God to do something half-assed and just say, it's already perfect. This is
So here's the big issue with blending or taking them chapter by chapter. It's obvious that he doesn't understand context here. You guys want to speak to this real quick before? I mean, I could, but I could speak to this all this all day, man, because this is like one of my pet peeves is not reading something in context. But I'm gonna let you guys take a stab real quick.
I mean, the basic problem there is that he's just assuming that when it says it's completed, that that there was not intended to be any sort of fluctuation in that, right? But I mean, obviously that's not the case. That's not what the author of Genesis has in mind. God creates human beings, right? And He expects that they're going to to be fruitful and multiply. He even commands them to be. So there's going to be a generation of more of them. So whatever is meant by completed, it doesn't mean that this is some kind of a locked system that there's never going to be any change inside of. And so complaining that the fact that new stars come about and that stars go out of existence, that somehow implies that creation was not complete. It just assumes that there's something other meant by that than what evidently would seem to be what the author means when he's saying that it's completed for God. Completed means that there's not creation of new matter, or specifically on the creation of Earth and things that are in relation to their function to Earth. that is completed, but it doesn't mean that there aren't processes involved in that are going to generate more things or have some things go out of existence. I see nothing in the text or in the definition of the word completed that rules out those sorts of events.
Yeah, Kyle?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think he just takes, and it's not even anything where I would be like with a younger creationist, right? I can understand a little bit when you read Genesis and you take it with modern eyes, and you're like, oh yeah, obviously 6 days. Like I can understand that. But some of the ways that he reads things, like complete, doesn't just have to mean that it's like complete and there's nothing more to be done. I mean, I think a more plausible interpretation, just prima facie reading it, is just to say, oh, like the system which God designed, intended to create, is complete. Like that just seems to make sense. And also too, I mean, there's sort of different ways to look at this depending on how you want to, depending on what your reading of Genesis is, right? So I differ from John Walton a little bit, but I lean towards like a generic-y framework model, which is, and then with a temple text aspect to
Heresy.
it. There you go, heresy. And so with regards to that, like, I mean, I could just say, it's actually really plausible to me that just means that the cosmic temple, which he was designing, he is completed. So how you interpret Genesis, I think, really feeds a lot into how you're going to understand what the author means by completed in that context.
So guys, this is one of the things that I noticed is that, Genesis 1 is written like a prologue, and it seems that the friendly atheists forgot that. So it's like, okay, we could see this transition here in chapter 2. Okay, so we don't need to rehash everything that happened in chapter 1. So if you just read it that way, it's kind of really easy to understand. But he doesn't do that. Again, he gets lost on the idea that, okay, there's a chapter 1 and there's a chapter 2. And you just can't do that. You can't do that with ancient manuscripts. And to speak to Walton's view, I've listened to so many different critiques about Walton's view now, especially the ones from William Lane Craig and Defenders, and I can't hold to that model. But I do see the merit in function, and we're getting to that point where he said, well, there was no moon, right? But he forgets Genesis chapter 1 tells us that in the beginning, God created the entire reality. The heavens and the earth is that entire reality. So I think this comes down to a big problem with how he's reading the text. He's not reading it the way it's meant to be read. I'll let you guys get the last word on that before we move on.
I was just thinking he'd make a great Calvinist, taking verses and chapters out of isolation and forgetting that, that these fit an overarching narrative, and that there's like a whole story that the book is trying to tell, and that you can't take one chapter out of that overall story and then just pick out pieces of it. No, it serves a function in the overarching purpose of the book, and every chapter of the Bible needs to be understood that way. It's a mistake really to just take a chapter of scripture out of the blue and start interpreting it without understanding what has come up until that point. I mean, that's just completely reasonable. Any other book that you read that's trying, that has a single cohesive purpose, then you're going to have to understand what comes before in order to understand what's going on at whatever point that you're reading.
All right, Kyle?
Yeah, and I just, it's such a modern thing, right? To one, separate this text into chapters, and to two, read it like the chapters are just whole separate entities and forget that this is just originally one text. And so when you do that, you're going to miss out on things, you're going to misunderstand things, possibly, and that kind of thing. People that separated into chapters weren't necessarily in the case or in the place where they were going to have the best understanding of the holistic cultural context and everything. And so that's just it's just bad hermeneutics, right? So it's not shocking. New atheists are bad at philosophy and bad at hermeneutics, but they need to get better, and we want them to get better. So yeah, and I guess with regards to Walton's view too, I actually don't really hold to the functionalist part of that, because I think I would agree with like Craig to some extent that I think is a bit untenable. But then I think with regards to just the temple text aspect, that bear part, because I take it to be a lot more of a not crass metaphor, but sort of a more vaguely metaphorical or worshipful temple text than the pseudo concordist model that Walton would like to put together with regards to function.
Yeah,
But
I
anyhow.
get that. I get that. And I'm not going to harp on you about it. I was just throwing that in there because I was trying to lead into the moon aspect there. But yeah, you know what, David? I hear you there on what you just said. And I just want to add, it's an abuse of literature. There's no way he reads any other modern text that way. You know why the Bible? Why is the Bible singled out in these type of critiques? Why is it abused versus read correctly? It just blows my mind. I don't get it.
Yeah, the sad thing is so much of it can be avoided if you just dive into some of the literature on this. And I mean, I don't mean like you've got to, go to like the full level to read everything out there on it, but so much misunderstanding can be avoided if you just read some commentaries. All right, maybe you don't want to read evangelical commentaries. Okay, I mean, there's commentaries on books of the Bible by atheists, and you know what? Most of them don't think it's stupid. They understand that that this is literature and that there are specific purposes here. And those of us who are not professional scholars in these areas, we can learn from that. Like I wanted to understand Romans 9 a couple of years back, so I took a few months and I studied it out, and you know what? I learned a lot from that. So so much error can be avoided just by putting in a little bit of time to study.
And you don't even have to read, like, you don't have to read a single word. Like, there's plenty of stuff just online video format stuff to just even get, because I don't think off the top of my head, I read some commentaries but not too many, but most of my knowledge relative to the text of Genesis would be from either audiobooks or online YouTube videos and that kind of thing. And I'll be the first to tell you that that's not the best way to get knowledge, but I'm just saying that information is just easily accessible out there if you actually want to find it.
All right, guys, we're going to move on.
The account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrub had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. But streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Let's see if I have this right. There were no plants because God needed water and someone to work the garden. But in Genesis 1, plants arrived on day 3 and man arrived on day 6. I mean, forget the chicken and the egg. Which came first, plants or people?
All right, let's address this one. David, go ahead.
Yeah, now if I understood what he's saying here correctly, it just sounds almost like a non sequitur here. It's like, well, I think I've understood his argument correctly. So wait, tell me if I got this right. Is he saying that he's got a problem with God making plants with no person because people aren't made till 3 days later, and so like that's a problem somehow? Because it doesn't seem to me like it's a problem if you have something, as long as God is going to make the solution that comes across to it. But maybe I misheard what he said there.
Kyle?
Yeah, I think his problem is more to do with like, it's again just his weird reading of it and his very separate reading, because I think he takes Genesis 1 and 2 to be sort of cohesive kind of discussions, and he also takes them to be narratival. Now I take them to be, cohesive is not the right word. Continuous. Now I take them to be continuous, and there's sort of some different views on that. I know as a young Earth creationist, I would have taken that to be sort of like Genesis 1 is like the meta level. Genesis 2 is kind of a zoom in kind of thing to what's happening. And if you take that kind of view, then it's just obvious that like nothing is happening here twice or over again, because he seems to think, he's like, oh, well, God already created the plants. God doesn't need to create the plants again and all this stuff. And like, that's just, even if you take a bad reading like that, it's not the case. Or if you take a reading like I'm going to say Genesis 1 as a temple text, right? Relative to describing how the cosmos came together and that sort of thing. And it's at a different sort of level. And then we're going down to this more specific type of mytho-history sort of account. But I don't know. He just has very strange ways of reading things that I'm not really sure that I understand why he reads things that way. I don't know. It's very odd to me.
Yeah. Again, like I could comment on this, sum it up in one comment is like learn how to read the text. I mean, that's a big issue here. And if you look at Genesis 2, I mean, there's word studies that you can do when it's talking about the fields and the shrubs and this and that you can actually glean that this isn't like we're at a perspective change now. We're done with the prologue hierarchy, and now we're going into the personal account, and it's from a different kind of point of view. So it's not uncommon to creation stories at this time. So let's get some comparisons instead of let's just go through Genesis and bash it and not even give it a honest critique in light of the history that it's also involved with. So yeah, I see that, and I see that there's different ways to understand like the perspective here. Are we talking about the garden? Are we talking about where man was made? And there seems to be some sort of justification to say, yeah, this isn't a retelling of the entirety of creation again. This is a continuation and this has have to do with where God is putting man at this time, and it's not about the overarching story of creation. I think that's right from what I remember off the top of my head. David, you got anything else to add?
No, I think you nailed it.
Make up your
I
mind.
got one more
And
thing
what
to pop in about. The one thing that I forgot to mention earlier that I think is relevant to this, and you'll see it throughout, is Emmett and the young Earth creationists want the idea to be that the Earth was perfect, right? So it just needed nothing or something like that. And the Bible does not say that. Like that's just clear, plain and simple. It says it was very good, and we don't have any reason to think that it was like flawless or that humans were some kind of Ubermensch or anything like that. And I think that Hammett sort of taking on that young earther assumption that the earth was just literally perfect will just confuse him later on relative to God putting man to work and some other stuff. So anyhow, I just wanted to mention that because he mentioned earlier something about thinking the earth was perfect, and I just wanted to mention that. So
All right.
happened to the firmament from Genesis 1? Now the streams are watering the earth? Last chapter, God put a roof over our heads so water wouldn't get through. I guess we already forgot about that. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. That is some seriously messed up Christian CPR. How do you get life into someone? Breathe directly into their booger holes. Notice that God doesn't install a brain. He just blows into our nose. Like,
So shouldn't the brain already be assumed that it's already there? I mean, I think this is just a division of spirit and material or matter. Body and soul. So I do think that's element is there, but as far as the streams being watered and so forth, again, this can be, you can just see that this is, we're getting a lot of reiteration and a deeper look into the creation from a different perspective. David, go ahead.
Yeah, this is like hyper wooden literalism on steroids right here. I mean, even when I was a young Earth creationist, I never read this text to think that God came right up to him and, put his mouth on his nose and breathe life into him. And I'm pretty sure that the Bible uses this particular phrase elsewhere as well, to have it breathed into your nostrils. And so this just seems to be a way of even a metaphor to an extent of receiving life or breath. And probably because if you think about breathing, I mean, you do it through your nose a lot. So that's kind of a logical way of thinking of it. But again, I don't think that the text is being just that hyper literal here, like the way he wants to read it. Like I think like young Earth creationists are too literal, but like he's taking this to the next level in the degree of literalness he's applying to the text.
All right.
It's not plausible literality. It's just awkward. Like, it's just very awkward how weirdly literal he makes it. Yeah, I agree with Paulman that so that it seems very weird, and it seems like that's not really the only plausible interpretation or way to put it. And even if you do take it literally, like God literally breathed into the nostrils of a person, I think it's more plausible, like David said, that it's just more representative kind of thing. But like, I mean, it's a story. Like what's weird about God putting, I mean, breath of life literally into someone? That does, I don't know. This doesn't. Among the course of the other, if you're going to read this like super literally, among the course of the other things that happen, that's not the weirdest thing that's happened thus far. So
Yeah. And then you got that aspect where we're getting a different perspective here again, and that's just totally ignored. And anyways, let's continue.
A fetish. Obviously, a man magically arriving onto the scene fully formed violates every piece of evidence we've ever found regarding evolution. It took millions of years before humans, as we know them, existed. We weren't blow-up dolls that God kept in a workshop somewhere.
All right, let's talk about this one. This hits on the area of evolution and so on. And it also kind of brings into the picture a extreme bias here. We're looking at how things got started. We're looking at the creation of the world. So did God create man specially, or did he use evolution? It assumes, I think he assumes that this should be, this is contradictory to what we have in science, but I don't think he's really familiar with the Christian views out there when it comes to evolution and theistic evolution and so on. David, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, well, I'd say there's broadly two ways you could respond to that as a Christian. And I'm going to take the way that I don't take first, is just through theistic evolution. You could even read that literally, that God formed man from the dust of the earth, right? You could take say that, yeah, there's more stages involved in that, but it doesn't say how God formed him from the dust of the earth. So you can have God sparking life from the dust of the earth, have that evolve over millions and millions of years, and eventually get to man and say that's how God did it. And that would even be a completely literal reading of the text. Now, that's not the view that I take here. He assumes the truth of the theory of evolution here, but does not argue for it. And as far as the evolution of man goes, if you look at the fossil evidence on this, and I have looked at it, not as intensely as some people, but I've looked at this more than your average person. And as you know, you look at the hominid fossil evidence, then you've really got two classes, right? You've got the Australopithecines and you've got Homo, right? Human beings fall in the category Homo, and Australopithecines are quite clearly apes. And so you've really got a lot of hominid fossil data, evidence in those categories. It's when you try to branch them together that it's really, really sparse. Like, and the closer to the middle you get, the sparser it gets. Like the very middle categories, we've got like Homo habilis, for example. Homo habilis should not exist. There was no such thing as a Homo habilis. What that is it's a scrapyard for any hominid bone that we find, and we don't know where to classify it. It gets thrown into Homo habilis. And the bones that are currently classified as being Homo habilis, they get reclassified all the time. It's a waste bin category is what it is. There was no such thing as the Homo habilis. Now we're missing the center that branches these. Neanderthals, there's really not any good reason to think that these weren't primitive humans. They had brain cases that were within the range of modern humans, even exceeding the range of modern humans in some cases. Human beings have Neanderthal DNA in them. Most people have I think it's like 1 to 2%. In Russia, there are people with an even higher degree of Neanderthal DNA, so we know they could interbreed with people. So there's no reason to think that Neanderthals weren't people. They had art, they had burial rituals, they had even some evidence is coming to light that they had the ability to navigate. The same thing with Cro-Magnons. They were modern humans. No reason to say that they weren't. And so, you just go through the line, pretty much everything. It pretty clearly either Australopithecine or Homo, and there's not a lot that's connecting the two. And so this has led some people like Casey Luskin, PhD in geology. He's formulated this theory of a big bang of the genus Homo. Because he says it appears out of nowhere in the fossil record. You just get the genus Homo, people. There's no reason to connect them to apes. And really, the fossil argument, it's not that great. So they'll try to make it, at the genetic level and stuff. But the point is, at the scientific level, we just don't have to even grant his assumption that that's true. There is at least some reason to think that human beings did just begin suddenly without hominid ancestors.
All right, Kyle?
Yeah, and I have interesting views on the theory of evolution, or common descent specifically. And I probably would say that I accept it on some interesting philosophical grounds, which is kind of some weird things that I won't get into right now. I'm kind of agnostic with regards to the scientific evidence, but anyhow, I definitely don't at all see any issue with taking. I mean, like I said, if you're familiar with the options that Christians have with, there are people who, like David said, like a friend of mine and David's, Swan Sana, he thinks that Adam and Eve were created out of the dust, but also that theistic evolution happened. So he thinks that there was like a historical Adam and Eve that were created out of the dust, or dust and rib, but what have you. But that also that common descent took place. And so these are just options, right? I mean, you don't have to be so narrow-minded with the way that you're going to read it. And there's something that that Paulman said that I wanted to add on to, but I've forgotten it by now. So.
All right, let's continue, guys.
At the North Pole. And notice that for all the talk about how we're made in God's image, God didn't create Adam while looking into a mirror. He just grabbed some dust, went like that, and boom, done. Looks just like me. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground.
I mean, we got to talk about the image of God. We have to talk about it just a little bit. The Imago Dei, he looks like me. I mean, what a gross misrepresentation of what the image of God is. David, you got anything that you want to add on that?
There is so much wrong with that on so many levels. I mean, let's begin with the fact that there's not even agreement on what Imago Dei refers to, right? What is the image of God? There's no agreement on that among Christians. There's no agreement among Bible scholars. There's just, we don't know what that refers to. Certainly, if you're an Orthodox Christian, then you're not going to think that refers to something about our physical bodies, right? Why? Because we don't believe that God has a physical body. We believe that God is a spirit, as the Gospel of John clearly says that he is. So whatever the whatever the Imago Dei refers to, it's nothing about our physical being, all right? It has nothing to do with blowing your nose. It has nothing to do with pooping, all right? None of that that's not the image of God. It's not talking about something, something about our physical being. I'm more inclined to think that it refers more to that we are rational, self-conscious beings. And of course, there's a lot of views on what it refers to, but I'm more inclined towards a sort of a metaphysical view like that. Now, let's just say that you take a cultish view, right? That there are cults who think that God literally has a physical body, right? And so when the Bible talks about the clouds being the dust of God's feet, then, it's telling us that God literally has feet, all right? I don't take that interpretation, but sure, let's say that God is corporeal like that. Why would God have to look into a mirror to do that? If we're saying that God can't know what he looks like to make someone out of the dust, I mean, even reading it the way that he wants to read it, I don't see anything absurd about that. Why would God have to be looking into a mirror in order to form dust into literally, his physical image? There's not any problem with that. So there are just so many ways you can respond to that.
All right, Kyle.
Yeah, this continues to pop out to me. Like Hemet just has this awkward combination of just bluster and ignorance, right? And so he's just confidently asserting these things, and it's just nonsense. It's just total nonsense. And I mean, the only people that I even know of that would say something like the image of God is like the physical image of God. Like I think Mormons, I think there are certain Mormon groups that say that, and like David said, there are cults who say that. And like you're reading the Bible, like the Mormons have a whole different system of things going along with that and that kind of thing. And it's just odd that he's, I don't know. Well, it's not surprising, but like he should be more aware of what Christians think it means to be the image of God. Otherwise, his critique is just totally meaningless. And like David said, there's disagreement. I think that's really important. There is widespread disagreement. On the other hand, no one takes the stupid view that he is espousing. Like it's just obvious that Christians don't think God is a physical being that we would literally be made in the physical image of. That's just silly.
Yes.
So
Exactly. I agree with both of you. Let's move on.
Ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Leave it to religion to make knowledge the evil villain in the story. I could teach you something, but then I'd have to kill you. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there, it was separated into 4 headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Asher. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. This is a weird tangent. This is Genesis 2. It's one of the first pages of the Bible. It's foundational to the Christian myth. And yet we have a detour into the geography of the land. It's like someone asking where you live, and instead of saying Chicago, you say, well, you take I-90 to the 4th exit and make a left turn at the 2nd stoplight. We were not asking for that kind of specificity. A river in Eden would have been good enough.
All right, let's look into this objection. David?
All right, so I'm going to address the thing you actually said before that, is saying that leave it to religion to make knowledge, the bad thing. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. It's not that the tree was saying that knowledge as such was evil. It's that this would give you a knowledge of good and evil. So we're talking about a special type of knowledge here. That would be moral knowledge. And so, there's, again, disagreement over what exactly that refers to among scholars. But he almost makes this sound like, that religion is saying, oh, well, it's bad to be knowledgeable. And so, you're supposed to be stupid. No, it's not talking about knowledge generically. It's talking about moral knowledge. All right. Now, there's a legitimate question to be raised there, right? Like, oh, well, did God not want us to know what was good and what was evil? Why did he want us to remain in this state of innocence? So, there's some questions there. And that's, I would even say, legitimate questions. But the question that he's trying just a absurd reading of the text. And then just his complaint there about like, oh, we weren't asking for that level of specificity. Excuse me, you didn't ask for anything. This is the author giving you the description that he wants to give. He's not trying to, fine tune it to whatever your particular concerns are. This wasn't even written with you in mind. This is written to a completely different audience in a completely different time where, yeah, this stuff probably would have been very interesting and very relevant to them. So that just seems like a very lame objection at the end there.
All right, go ahead, Kyle.
yeah, second objection is trash. I mean, it's just he's literally I can't imagine any other purpose for it than he's just like searching for things to be annoyed about with the text. There's just no legitimate thing there. With regards to the tree, I think that there's some pretty good arguments to be made that God did eventually intend for us to eat from that tree. But it was part of a process, and I have some complicated views as to why I think that. But regardless of what view you want to take, right? It's definitely, as David said, it's not knowledge simplicator. God doesn't have an issue with knowledge, that kind of thing. and it's just this special kind of thing. Whatever you think the purpose of the tree is, right? It seems pretty plausible that God has some good reasons for thinking this, and also I think it just displays. I mean, he has this very modernistic view relative to his thinking about um, the relationship between religion and knowledge. I mean, historically, there's generally a pretty strong relationship. But I think if you're honestly looking at history, it's sort of one of those it's complicated sort of things, right? So there have been times like the emergence of the theory of evolution when religion and science have had some struggles against each other. On the other hand, there was huge periods of time where the church was just adamantly working with scientists to further science. And generally speaking, a lot of the people that we might consider scientists were part of religions and stuff like that, historically, ancient times, and that kind of thing. And so it, especially when like he's almost trying to take this monolithic statement about like generically all religion has been against science, even like as far back as this text is, which is just odd to me because at best you have a kind of recent battle between religion and science, which is not historically the case.
Yeah,
Right, because everyone was religious back
right,
then.
right. And what's funny is that there's another stab at him ignoring the genre. I mean, there's obviously a reason the author is giving you these details. It's not because he just wants to. He has a reason for it, and at least be integral to try to find why he's given those details instead of just assuming it's a weird way he wrote. Nah, explore the reason why that's the way it is. So I mean, I just got a problem with the whole arrogance of it all. How he's approaching it. Period.
Geography and names aside, why is it necessary that the gold is good? Is another creature scamming Adam with bad gold? What's he gonna do with gold? Spend it? Trade it with all the other people who don't exist? Stare at it? I mean, he already has the trees. Who named these cities and rivers? And why did it even matter? Adam stayed put in Eden. He wasn't hitchhiking. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. Work it, Adam. I thought Eden was perfect already. What is there to take care of?
All right, let's hit this one. He had a lot of little objections in there. I think again, you've got to realize that the author is writing to an audience. So there's a reason he's given these details and saying, hey, the gold was good. He's trying to say, hey, everything was good in this garden. Everything was good in this area. It's not like Adam wanted to spend it. His perception of how to read is way off. I mean, there's no contextualizing in it at all. There's no putting it in its historical context at all. It's just, let's question every little thing and ignore the bigger picture and ignore this basic rule of reading, which is understanding the author-audience relationship. And I have a big problem with that. David, you got anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's not like God was writing this or to himself. It's an author who's writing this to people later on, and he's completely insensitive to that. He's like, thinks that like God is writing this chapter to himself or something. No, this is being written at a later point for the benefit of other people. That's why it's mentioning details about the gold being good. That would be of interest to them. It's not about what God was going to do with the gold. That's not the point there. And then also this point at the end about how if the garden's already perfect, why does Adam need to work it? Or take care of it rather. I was like, what if I gave you let's just say there was a perfect dog and I gave it to you as a gift and I was like, now take care of that. That would make total sense, wouldn't it? The fact that I give you something perfect does not mean that it doesn't need to be taken care of, or that it's not going to need further maintenance, right? Because we live in a world where things tend to denigrate and they have to be upkept and such.
And David,
So,
it does go back to that age-old question, what do you mean by perfect? You know what I mean? Is your perception of perfect like our feet can't even touch the dirt? Is it like we float along in this serenity? I mean, what is your definition of perfect? Why isn't perfection tilling the ground and watching new things sprout up? I don't get it.
Right, right. Well, yeah, I mean, there's that to be said as well. Maybe that is included in perfection, is that it was perfect for man to, be able to have a living, but it doesn't mean that he was, going to lay on a couch all day and be a bum watching television. I mean, maybe that's his idea of perfection, but almost certainly not what the author of Genesis would have considered to be perfection. So, yeah, I mean, it's so asinine in a way. But what do you got, Kyle?
Yeah, I think I just agree. With regards to Adam working, right? I mean, it definitely does. It is valuable as to what you mean by perfection, because they're even like I'm not a Thomist, but I'm definitely familiar. Or sorry, what's the word? I'm definitely friendly. Sorry, it's getting late here. I'm definitely friendly. Not really. It's actually like 7 o'clock. I'm really friendly to some Thomist ideas relating to like natural law and the nature of things, and conforming to your nature makes you more perfect and that kind of thing. And so here it's just completely plausible to me that you could just say something like that for Adam, right? That God designed Adam to that his point of perfection, right, is just working and tilling the ground and making it good. Or you don't even have to take the kind of position that the ground was perfect and didn't need anything done to it. Like I take a sort of long-term view where I think that ultimately in heaven we will actually like terraform and do things to the entire universe and make the entire universe habitable. And I think that that's kind of where things were starting in Eden, where we're taking one planet and we're being fruitful and we're multiplying over it, and eventually we'll go to other planets and so on and so forth. But if you take that sort of view about things, then it just makes sense that, like, of course, like that's Adam's purpose. Like he's there to be fruitful and multiply and take care of this wonderful thing that God has given him, and he can enjoy that. And so, and work's not a bad thing either, right? We don't need to assume that there is just some intrinsic evil involved with working. I think that work's implicator is actually a good thing. If we have a good job or something that is fulfilling and filling us with life, then I think that's a good type of thing. That's work. That's good. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, God created us with a purpose in mind, so I totally agree. Let's move on.
God create a beautiful garden, then plant some weeds just to be a jerk? I created you. Here's a list of chores. You would also think this passage suggests a kind of environmentalism. I made this, so take care of it. And yet only about a quarter of white evangelical Christians accept the science of climate change. You can't take care of God's creation if you refuse to see how you're messing it up. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." What sort of God says, "I've created this giant playpen for you to frolic in, but I've placed a landmine in the middle. Don't step on it or else"? God could have just not done that. Instead, he turned his literal Eden into a death trap. What's the harm in knowing the difference between good and evil anyway? Those
All right, let's hit this one, David.
Well, first, let's hit this point about environmentalism. That seems like that's a plus to the chapter, right? If it's telling us to take care of the earth, and that seemed to be something that when you talk about the science of climate change, it sounds like something that he would appreciate. So sure, you can call out Christians, and I mean, I did this myself all the time, who take kind of this attitude towards the earth that it's not something that we should be taking care of. Then I would agree with him that it is unfortunate that many Christians take that attitude, but that's a fault with them. That it's a plus in the text that if it's teaching some kind of environmentalism, and so that's not a criticism of the text of Genesis. That's just a criticism of some Christians.
Right.
And now what was the other point he brought up after that?
In the middle of the
Yes, that was it. Yeah, I mean that's just a bad analogy there. So a lion mine is the kind of thing that you can step on by accident. That's not the sort of thing that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is. He would be being a jerk if he put it in there and didn't tell them that they couldn't eat of it. But by putting it in there, then he is giving them a test, and he says, what would be so bad about having knowledge of good and evil? Well, if there's not evil in the world yet at that point, then you wouldn't need it. So, it's not knowledge that would be necessary, but it does serve as kind of a test that gives people the ability to choose to follow God or not. So, we got a whole bunch of problems for Calvinism right there, but I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
Yeah, I just agree. Like, as I mentioned earlier, like on my view, the tree has a purpose that will be fulfilled. It's not like God is saying like eternally you'll never, like, I'm just leaving this tree here. And I think there are perfectly tenable views that say that kind of thing as well. I think I think the thing that sticks out more to me about this clip has to do with the environmentalism. And so on one level, right, I think that there's this almost shifting of the goalposts, right? So he's focusing on the text, and then suddenly there's something plausibly positive about the text, but Hammett wants to be negative about it. So he's like, I'm going to shift the goalposts and make it about the Christians who don't adhere to this, and then just ignore the fact that this is good. Because I'll be honest, like, I think I'm not like extreme environmentalist, but I'm a heck of a lot more environmentalist than a lot of my fellow conservatives here down south. And so I'm going to be the first one to say I do think the Bible teaches some sort of environmentalism relative to that, and that we really should take good care of the earth. And that I agree with him that Christians who ignore that and ignore the science of climate change, I don't even care about the science, just be consistent within your own worldview. And I think that is really important. But at the same time, his just wanting to find anything wrong that he can is, I think, an issue, because I think you should be willing to see the positive points of a view that you disagree with, as opposed to just searching for everything possibly wrong you can with it.
Yeah, and just to jump in here on that is, I would say that kind of having a good eschatology here is important as well, because if I think you have a biblical eschatology, then you realize that God is going to reshape the earth and such. And so, unfortunately, a lot of Christians have this kind of escapist eschatology where they think, the earth is just temporary. God's going to destroy it anyway. The rapture is going to happen soon, so we're going to be out of here. And then God's just going to, rain hellfire down on the world and, going to completely destroy it. I don't think that that's a biblical eschatology at all. And so it's actually harmful. So I think that that this actually, as you were saying, Kyle, it gives us a good reason and good, really biblical grounds to kind of combat that bad idea. But instead of focusing on that this is something good in Scripture, instead he's got to find something bad and just be like, well, Christians don't listen to this part here.
Yeah, but
What?
what about what about
Oh, sorry.
what about the freedom that the trees actually provide? I mean, it gives us a choice and gives us the ability to be free to choose one way or another, right?
God predestines all things.
Well, that's
And
the
there's a dual
presuppositionals coming out.
Yeah, there's a dual aspect of how you can view the trees as well, right? So let's imagine that, because I think the interpretation people want to take out of this is God is being oppressive, by making the tree so that people can't do it, and or people can't eat from it. But I think too that, think about it this way. Think about a man who gets married to someone. Like, he's committing to a woman for his whole life, right? And so he can be really, really disappointed. Every time he sees a woman, he's like, oh, I could have married that woman. He can be like super disappointed and feel really trapped within his marriage. Or he can be like so joyful about his marriage and the fact that he's married to this wonderful woman that every time that he looks at another woman, he's like that's a representation of the sacrifice of how much I really earnestly care for the woman that I've chosen. And so I think that he's too quick to just assume, even if we take that kind of interpretation, that would be a bad thing, for God to put that tree there as a sort of test, or as a sort of representation of the sacrifice. I just don't think that that's at all obvious.
Yeah, and his whole complaint about what's wrong with knowing good and evil, you know, well, that you're coming from a perspective that you already know it. You already know the difference between good and evil. So it's kind of like, you know,
Ignorance can be
yeah. I mean,
bliss.
well, hey, what if you never did? What would your perspective be then? I mean, you can't know that. You can't know you can't know the answer to the question you're trying to ask, and you're trying to put it as a critique, and it's just unfair. It's not relevant. It's not even shouldn't even be brought up, in my opinion. But we can move on.
Seem like important things to know. I mean, it's one of the first things you teach a child. This is good, this is bad. If a child asks you, "Daddy, can I do this?" you don't say, "Yes, you can, but now I must murder you." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Why was it not good? Adam had food, stuff to look at, good gold. He could run around without clothes. Not a bad life. Admit it, you would totally swap your current life for the chance to run naked in an apple orchard because you have no other responsibilities. And why did it take this long for God to realize Adam needed a lady friend? You would think God designed the blueprint in advance, but he's obviously just winging it. Then he realized he forgot something. Not exactly the work of someone who's supposedly all-knowing. And why?
All right, so now he's taken a shot at the omniscience of God and the whole plan of God. I think there's a big failure here to see the typology here about the family. About a family in relationship with God. I think there's a big miss. It's like it flies way over his head. But the whole idea of attacking how God made the man and the woman. I mean, for young Earth creationists, you would see that they would say, well, it happened in the same day, so yeah, there's not a big problem with this. So I don't know what he's talking about here on time, and how long it took, and it should be in the blueprint and so forth. So, and the stab at God's omniscience. I mean, I don't get it. So, David, I'll let you take a stab.
Well, Kyle might have a different perspective here because I know he kind of holds to a more open theist view on that. But first, let's talk about this because this seems really absurd to me. You said, admit it, you would swap your current life for the chance of running naked through a garden with no responsibility.
Admit it.
Like, that is absurd. Okay, my relationships with people, and I mean, I'm a social person. I like people. All right, so maybe this is just me, but my relationships with people, that's some of the most important things in the world to me. I wouldn't swap that for anything. And so, no, I wouldn't want to just run naked through a garden with no responsibilities at the cost of, giving up relationships. Even if I never had these relationships to begin with, I mean, I think I'd get pretty darn lonely.
Yeah,
Just,
and yeah, and also, I mean, can't you see? He's really coming at this from his ideal of what his perfection is, of what
But
of his what is it utopia is, and to me it's just wrong. It's not what the Bible presents.
for him, I guess apparently his utopia is running naked through a garden
with no
but
responsibilities.
with no Yes, he really hates his responsibility. Which I mean, I don't know why he's making this video. Then I mean, he should be getting as few responsibilities as he can.
Yeah.
But no, I really think he's missing the point of the text. All right, especially like when he's trying to make it about oh, God didn't know this was going to happen or whatever. Not the point of the text. What is trying to be said there is that people need companionship with other people, right? That it's not good for people to be by themselves, and that they need that relationship with people. And so, yes, it makes it from God's perspective that God is observing. It's not good for the man to be alone. But that's the point of the text that it's trying to get across. It's not just trying to give you this, monotone, oh, and then God realized this. Yeah. That's not the point of it. And so I would dare say that he has missed the forest for the trees.
And yeah, he's reading into the text stuff that the author never intended. Kyle, I mean, what do you got, bud?
So what I'm hearing here is that David wants to run naked through an apple orchard with people rather than by himself. So that's what I heard from that. That's what I understood. Now,
with no responsibilities.
Yeah, with no responsibilities, exactly.
Streaking through the apple
And
orchard.
so, yeah, even though I am an open theist of a kind, I'm very different open theist than a lot of other open theists, but I think my view would qualify as open theism. I would say that all we have to take from it not being good is not to say any statement about like Adam's life is not in and of itself a good thing, right? I mean, I think it's obvious that that's a good life, right? The point is just that God, at least to me, that when I'm reading it, the reading I would take of it is just that like God's plans relative to creation are not complete. In that regard, it's not good, it's not finished. And so it's not like he just came up with a plan. He's like, oh yeah, I forgot, I need to add a woman. No. Like God had all that stuff in mind. When he says it's not good, he doesn't mean that it's not. He doesn't mean that this is like a bad thing that Adam is experiencing this, or that it's not good in some way. He's just saying like I need to finish. Like I have things here that I need to finish with regards to that and with regards to creating the woman and that kind of thing. And just saying, like that's the prima facie reading of it. I think if you're going to be plausible with it, this whole thing about I don't know, it's like I said, this guy just is kind of weird to me. It throws me off. Even less than or even more than David saying he wants to run around naked in an apple orchard with people and never.
All right, let's continue.
Why is she his helper? In Genesis 1, God made man and woman simultaneously, and he treated them equally. Suddenly she's his assistant? I mean, how is that for a quick demotion? Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. What a convenient way for the Bible's writers to just stop doing work. Should we name all the animals and birds? There are like thousands of them. Let's just say God made Adam do it and move on. What's Adam doing anyway? I'll call that a bird. That's another kind of bird. Bluebird. Blackbird. There are millions of species, too. How long did this take Adam? And who's keeping track of all these names? I mean, how do we know Adam didn't just see a bird, name it, and then give the same bird another name a minute later when it flew by again? Keep in mind that young Earth creationists believe God created the world in 6 24-hour days. So Adam named millions of creatures in a matter of hours. They get around that by saying there were just a couple thousand species, tops. That's not true. New species are discovered all the time. Thousands per year minimum. We still don't have names for everything, so Adam clearly dropped the ball. He literally only had one job.
All right, David.
Well, all right. So first, this bit about is saying that in Genesis 1 he created them together and treated them equally. Sorry, where does it say that? At the end of the chapter, it says male and female created he them. It doesn't say he created them at the same time, and it doesn't say anything about him treating them equally. In fact, in all likelihood, given the culture that this was written in, they would not have regarded women as being treated equally with men. Now, that being said, that understanding is not even necessitated from what's in the text. Saying that she was his helper in no way means that she was below him or that she was demoted or however he wanted to put that. You can be someone's helper and be on equal footing with them, as it were, because you can people can require mutual support,
David,
right? So it doesn't.
David, let me interrupt you. I mean, isn't there a whole idea that taking her from his side was one of the first things to say, hey, they're human beings just like you are. We didn't have that in a lot of ancient societies. So the fact that he took her from the side, not above or below, is a testament to who she's supposed to be as ruling alongside him.
Yeah, there are theories on that, and that's not necessarily explicit in the text, but yes, you can definitely make that from what is being said there. The point that I was trying to make is that saying that she's his helper doesn't mean that she is lesser than he is, right? In fact, the text very much suggests, in fact, even directly says basically that Adam was incomplete without her, that it wasn't good for him to be alone. So it's not like that she was in some kind of subservient role to him. It's that this is mutual support, that they need each other. And that's what the point there is. And there was something he said at the end that, with the naming the animals. He says this was like a lazy cop out for them. Now we don't have to name them all. Does he seriously think that animals didn't have names at the time that Genesis was written? That people didn't already have names for these animals? So I don't think that laziness was.
But who's to say Adam's names would have carried over in the first place?
Well, yeah, I mean that's ridiculous as well. But then this other point is, he says that young Earth creationists, and I mean I'm not a young Earth creationist, but he says that they believe it was created in 6 24-hour days, and then from that he concludes that means that Adam had to name them all in one day. No, it doesn't. The text never says that he named them all in one day, so there's no reason that the young Earth creationist could say, no, that was spread out over quite some time. In fact, we have no idea how long it was between the end of creation and the fall in Genesis 3. There could have been any amount of time in there for Adam to name these animals. And, in all likelihood, he probably didn't have a whole lot to do besides that, even on a very literal young Earth creationist reading. So these are just like really weak, bad criticisms.
Yeah. All right, Kyle?
Yeah, and I think if I recall correctly, and someone might correct me about this, but if I recall correctly, I believe the word used for helper is is there, which is this kind of idea of a helpmeet. So someone who's like coming alongside you and supporting you and that kind of thing. So the kind of position that Eve is being given is complementary to Adam, and it's a very honorable position that she's being there to help support him and like be there to to complement him and his attributes. But then also with regards to the species too, he brings up this because I think everything David said I agree with basically with regards to that. But he brings out this weird point about we're discovering new species every day, right? As if that's some sort of defeater. But I would just assume that the text would be using some sort of thing relative to a certain class of creatures, maybe like Nefesh or something like that. It doesn't really have to be relegating it to little infinitesimal bacteria and whatever that Adam had to name or something like that. I'm sure that there would be, and also Hebrew taxonomy was different than modern taxonomy. That's just a no duh kind of thing. And so their classifications of animals would have been different. So I don't see how any of what he said is any kind of a defeater, even to young Earth creationism, which it's saying something if you can't provide a relevant defeater to young Earth creationism. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of it is irrelevant, But anyways, let's continue.
Man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. And while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. That is just horrifying. Adam was sleeping. God tore open his body, broke off one of his bones, then I guess sutured him up, all without anesthesia. And Adam apparently never even woke up during this assault. And what's the thought process here? God needs to make one person, so he molds some dust, then breathes life through his nose. God needs to make another person, violently rip open the first one. What did you want me to do? No, too much work. Get me a scalpel. What do you even need a rib for? What do you do with one rib? Take some DNA for God's sakes. Grab a cell. Can you imagine if God said, I need to make another human. I guess I'll just amputate that guy who's napping over there and steal his femur. God managed to create Adam and birds and wildlife without a problem. But apparently a single human woman was too advanced for him. Then the Lord God made...
All right. David, I see you laughing over there, man.
I'm sorry, that was funny. No, I mean that's just where do you get the idea in the text that this was a violent assault or that God ripped him open without anesthesia? But then it's like he immediately contradicts himself and says, "Oh, but Adam didn't wake up through any of that." Well, then maybe that's a hint that it wasn't this horrible assault like that you're describing it as. You think. But I mean, there's almost certainly got to be some metaphor in there. But even taking it very literally, there's no reason to read this as being a violent assault on Adam. And here's the thing: did he not just complain before about how God made Adam? Right,
Yeah.
like by saying, "Oh, why did he breathe it into his nostrils and stuff?" And now he's saying, "Oh, well, he should have done it this
Yeah, it
way."
was
That
a
I
lot
just complained
easier.
about. Why did? It's like no matter how God does it, then he's in trouble with this guy.
Yeah.
So God just can't win.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, this is something that is just weird to me. But just my opinion, but prima facie, there are certain Bible passages, especially in the Old Testament, where you're like, you kind of have to take a step back as a modern reader, and you're like, that doesn't look too good. But then there's ones that just don't, right? And there's times when like there's just totally normal passages, and then like new atheists trademark, they will, as Steve McRae would call them, they take something and they just transform it into something that's totally not. So I've heard this before with the virgin birth, where people are like, God raped Mary. And I'm like, what? Where do you even get that? And then this whole thing with like the violent operation and whatever, and I'm like, no, where are you getting that from? That just doesn't make any sense. And so it's not only that he's taking, like he was earlier, he's taking the weird literalistic reading. He's just taking something from the text that is not even there. Like it's just, there's nothing in the text that tells us that it would be that way, and that kind of thing. There is some reason to believe, I think, even prima facie, that there's like some metaphor involved relative to this. Like, I don't know, it's bad scholarship, it's not the best that could be happening.
Right.
So.
All right, guys, let's because we only got 2 minutes and 40 seconds left on this. So
made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." It's a good thing Adam named the birds and animals, because God's a deadbeat. We were this close to having birds and woobirds. Also, how lazy is that? This is Adam, and this is woman. What about Eve? No. Too few syllables. Do you think Adam noticed his rib was missing? Did he see the scar? He had to know who did it too. It's not like anyone else was around. And by the way, men and women have the same number of ribs. Maybe they didn't realize that in biblical times, but it is true. So either God grew that rib back when no one was looking, or someone's really bad at creating mythology. Also, theoretically, if God created Eve from Adam's rib, then the genetic material would have been the same. In other words, Eve would have been Adam's clone, which has serious repercussions when it comes to sex. That's just weird, and not a good way to begin a diverse species. Honestly, if all that was required was a rib, God really could have made Adam and Steve, and it would have made just as much sense. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. That's quite a leap there. Adam didn't even have a father and a mother. He had one dad. One single dad, no mommy. And God would have failed a paternity test since Adam had none of his daddy's DNA. He's like 99% dust and 1% rib. Slightly less than that now, I guess. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. His wife, she doesn't even get a name. She's just wife or helper. And why would they feel shame? There are no other people around. When did they get married? Did I miss the verse where they had a wedding? I didn't realize Christians were into this whole arranged marriage thing, or cohabitation. Genesis 1 and 2 are two versions of the same story, and neither one makes any sense. It's bad history, it's bad science, it's bad cosmology, it's bad storytelling. You couldn't even grow a Christian cinematic universe from all this because no one can seem to agree on an origin story. And we've only gotten through the first few pages.
All right, guys, this is it. That's the end. So this last 10, mainly about Adam and Eve. A lot of assumptions, a lot of just bad reading again, especially the part where he's talking about, he's ignoring the audience again when he's talking about the two shall become one flesh and so forth. David, what do you got on that? I saw you laughing over there again.
Well, he's funny. I'll give him that. But let's see. There was one point I really wanted to hit on. This part about oh yeah. So I once had this. I think it was the Sunday school teacher I had when I was very young, who told me that men did have one rib less than women, and that this was a proof of creationism because the Bible already told us this, before science figured it out that men have one rib less than women, and it's because God took one out of Adam. And not only is that just completely false, but I, went on to, study that some more, it just doesn't make sense. If you take a rib out of someone, their DNA is the same, and they, for example, if I cut your ear off and you have a kid, the kid's not going to be born with one ear. They're still going to get two ears. So where does he get this idea from that if God takes one of Adam's ribs, barring for the fact that it wasn't this violent Holocaust like he paints it as, but where does he get the idea that it's then going to be passed on to every one of his descendants? Every one of his male descendants is now only going to have, or is going to have one rib less than women. There is no reason to make that assumption. The text never states, and this is now the reason that men have one rib less than women. It's just completely, that's just completely illogical. I mean, like, I'm sorry, like, but nowhere else would we make those kinds of assumptions. That if part of the body got hacked off, oh look, they made a mistake because look, all the rest of the males who were born since then don't have this part of their body. It's silly.
Yeah, I think so too. Kyle, what you got?
Yeah, I don't have much, but yeah, no. But yeah, yeah. For one, it's the side. It's not like a rib specifically. At least that's what I understand to be the case. So even if being hyper literal about the rib is kind of weird. But um, yeah. So he talks about there wouldn't be like species diversity, which I just think is really weird. But this is something I was going to mention earlier that I forgot about. Sorry, my brain's like in a muddle today. But is that even as a young Earth creationist, you aren't necessarily committed to saying that Adam and Eve were the only two humans around the Earth at that time. I have friends that are young Earth creationists that think that God created more than just Adam and Eve at the time. They think there are implications in the text to suggest that there are more people. Now, I would say that stands in support of something more like theistic evolution or older, something like that. But even young Earthers are fine with being like, oh yeah, Cain had a wife from people that were outside of the garden or something like that. So, you're not even committed, even on the most extreme view of young Earth creationism, to say that like, oh yeah, there's no other people in the garden. But yeah, so there's yeah. By this point, he said so much that I just kind of like forgot exactly what he said. But
Right.
that's my main thoughts with regards to
Yeah,
that. So
another thing too was, you know, there's this idea that okay, when did they get married? And I'm like, don't you see this as a representation of marriage to begin with? Like there's obviously they're driving at this whole idea of family and how they become one flesh and stuff like this. This is like the first marriage. This is supposed to be what it looks like. The father presenting the daughter to the husband. This is how we've done it for years. This is where we got how to get married for years, and it's still a practice today. So it's crazy, these assumptions that he's making, and they're coming from a particular way that he's reading Genesis, and it's not scholarly. It's very wooden. It's very literal, and yeah, man, it's wrong, and it's not the way you're supposed to read that text, and that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave it. David, you got anything else?
No, I think that that was about sums it up. And no, I mean this review has probably seemed harsh to some people, but in our defense, he was not being charitable towards us, and so I think, in fact, we were even more charitable than he was in some ways. But the lesson to be learned here is, if you're going to critique a position, do it well. Try to understand it in the best sense possible. Like it's a mark of intellectual integrity when you can steel man the other position. That is, even if there really is a weakness, help that weakness, make it as strong as possible, and then still show that the argument doesn't work. Don't try to make it sound as silly and stupid and ridiculous as possible when literally none of the adherents are going to agree with this representation of their views. It's called straw manning them. And I mean, that's really what these arguments are, and unfortunately what a lot of pop atheism on YouTube is. It's straw manning Christians.
Yeah, and Kyle, you got anything? We're gonna wrap it up here. Kyle, is there any way we can get in touch with you? You want to put any plugs? This is the time to do it.
Yeah, so I do have a channel called Planning His Bulldog, but I don't have any videos up on there. And I started working, so I probably won't have videos out there for a while because it will be some in-depth, well-researched philosophy, and I'm going to. But that, I guess that's the upside. So I have a lot of plans to do stuff regarding epistemology, metaphysics, arguments for and against the existence of God. I just want it to be like a bare philosophy kind of channel because that's kind of my passion. So that's kind of what it will be, but it's not very developed at this point. But if you want to, I think.
Are you going to promote? Are you going to
Do what?
promote the Cartesians?
The what now?
The Cartesian view of epistemology.
The Cartesian
No.
approach to epistemology.
It is interesting, but no.
It is.
I will debate you on this till the day you die, my
Yeah,
friend.
I know you'll fight me. I'm right now. I'm a radical probabilist. So me and David have some fun discussions about that. As you might.
And anything
think-
circular
I think-
reasoning's okay. So I got to remember that.
I'm in between. I think I'm more Cartesian, but I would also say that I'm also a little bit of Russellonian.
Yeah, I like it. You know what?
I do like the idea
I'm
where
a
you can just say, I just have no good reason to believe that. I like that approach sometimes. But yeah, I hear you.
There you go. Yeah, I enjoy that type of thing, and you can join the 22 subscribers that are currently subscribed to my channel.
Right on.
That have no content to watch. So
they're just waiting for when it comes out, right? Awesome. Well,
there you go. In 20 years from now, they'll be like, I subscribe to this guy.
Well, hey, that's awesome. Yeah, check out Kyle and be patient with him. We've got some awesome stuff coming up, guys. We've got February. We're going to be doing a guest host month. So we're going to try to get as many of our former guests and debaters and so forth to actually help me or David or both of us to host. So we're going to be hosting different debates there. We've got 3 big interviews lined up. We're still waiting on one of the guys to get back right now. But the first one, as you can see, is Jay Warner Wallace. We got Gary Habermas coming on and Fuzz Rana, who's going to be talking about evolution. He just had a new book about evolution come out, too. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and hominids and so forth. So stay tuned, guys. We've got a lot more coming. The next Raw, we will actually be probably critiquing another movie or a video that David wants to critique. Again, this was for one of our fans, and we will periodically check in and throw one of the Friendly Atheist videos in here that is particularly dealing with Genesis. So, yeah, David, is there anything else that you want to add?
What movie are we going to do next?
I don't know, man. Which one do you have on the list? I've seen a couple of them. There's one, actually, a new one coming out called My Interview with the Antichrist. That should be interesting. Kind of a knockoff for the Interview with the Vampire, right? But yeah, that, or we could hit God's Not Dead too.
We can hit the God's Not Dead movies, especially 1 and 2. 3 didn't really have that much to do with apologetics. And then also the Left Behind films. I'm not sure how much you want to do on that, but because that's all eschatology.
You want to do Nicolas Cage one?
I was actually thinking the Kirk Cameron
Cameron,
ones, because
alright.
those ones are like so hokey that
Yeah.
it's funny. The Nicolas Cage one was just a
Although I
disaster.
would watch the one with Mr. T in it again.
That wasn't a Left
No, it was
Behind
another
movie,
one.
though.
It was around the same time.
That was
Yeah.
another one by it was another one of Cloud 10
Yeah.
Pictures. Yeah, but
Well,
Christian movies are so
right
bad.
on. Well, guys, until next time, we hope that you guys are blessed and have a good one, a good week, and stay tuned.